Hello Year 12s and welcome to this video on the role of the media in law reform, that is, the role of the media in changing the law. The word reform means to change. There are three things that you need to do while you're watching this video. First, take the very best Cornell notes that you can. Second, use the pause and rewind functions. Use the pause function if you need to stop this video to take notes. Use the rewind function if you need to go back over any information contained in this video. And the third thing that you need to do is have your summary books open in front of you. As we go through this video, I'll give you some guidance as to what you should write in your summary books. Once you've finished watching this video, make sure that you read the pages from the textbook referred to on this slide. And if you find any additional information from that reading that you think is useful, then supplement your Cornell notes with that additional information. Well, let's get started then. On this slide, I've set out your learning intention for this video. Make sure that you write this learning intention down in your Cornell notes. As a result of watching and taking notes on this video, you should be able to analyze the role of the media, including social media, in law reform using examples. You will note the use of the task word analyze. Analyze requires you to dissect the role of the media in law reform, that is, in influencing a change in the law. An analysis is more than a description or explanation. It involves some kind of judgment, commentary, or extrapolation. Use words such as moreover, therefore, as a consequence, it follows from this that, this is significant because, as well as any of the discussion words such as however, on the other hand, in contrast, while, and whereas. The information contained in this video will assist you to analyze the role of the media in law reform. The media plays an important role in influencing law reform. It does this in three main ways. First, the media raises law reform issues. It does this by reporting on events relevant to law reform, informing members of Parliament and the public of the views of people in the community about particular law reform issues, and informing members of the public about the law reform agendas of the different political parties, such as the government, the opposition, and the crossbenchers. Second, the media provides a forum for people to express their views on law reform issues and to discuss or debate those views. And third, the media can actively influence the opinions of the public about law reform issues, which in turn can influence the opinions of members of Parliament about law reform issues. This is because of the principle of representative government, which means that members of Parliament will be more inclined to vote for a change in the law where this is supported by voters, because otherwise they risk being voted out of Parliament at the next election. The media can do this through opinion pieces and also by publicising, encouraging, or organising petitions and demonstrations. Broadly speaking, there are two types of media. These are social media and traditional media. Social media refers to digital tools and platforms that can be used to share information in real time between large groups of people. Examples of social media include Facebook, X, previously called Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, blogs, podcasts, and YouTube. Let's now look at how social media performs each of the three roles of the media in law reform that I've described on the previous slide. Social media can be used to raise law reform issues on a large scale. This is made possible for a number of reasons. First, there is a large number of social media users. For instance, in October 2023, 78.5% of the Australian population had active social media accounts and spent an average of 1 hour, 53 minutes per day on social media, with each user having an average of 6.3 social media accounts. Second, social media is very popular because it can be accessed from an increasingly large range of mobile devices such as tablets, smartphones, and smartwatches. And third, social media is also very popular because it enables users to share information and views through the use of video as well as text. Video is a particularly effective way of sharing information and views because it can use powerful images that make a lasting impression. For example, video footage that was widely distributed on social media showing the cruel conditions in which livestock was being transported from Australia to other countries was influential in persuading the public and therefore Parliament that there was a need to change the law so as to regulate the conditions for the transport of live animal exports. In addition to raising law reform issues, social media provides a forum for a wide range of views on law reform issues to be raised and discussed. Social media allows a person's views on law reform issues to be shared with a large audience. Social media allows a person to read the views of other social media users about law reform issues. Social media gives social media users direct access to the views of politicians and their parties on law reform issues. Social media enables social media users to express their views on law reform issues directly to politicians. And finally, the interactive nature of social media provides a forum for different views on law reform issues to be discussed and debated. As a result, social media can influence the opinions of the public and therefore the opinions of members of Parliament about law reform issues. On this slide, I have shown you a snapshot of parts of the GetUp website, which is an example of how social media can be used to provide a forum for views on law reform issues and can influence views about law reform issues. People can use this website to inform themselves about a range of issues, including law reform issues, and can also sign up to petitions that call for changes in the law. For example, the GetUp website hosts petitions calling for changes in the law to protect whistleblowers who breach confidentiality restrictions to expose government misbehaviour, changes to the law to outlaw hate speech, and changes to the law to better protect sites of cultural significance to our First Nations peoples. The other type of media besides social media is traditional media. Traditional media refers to conventional ways of communicating information to the mainstream public. Examples of traditional media include newspapers, television, and radio. Traditional media can play an important role in influencing law reform because, like social media, it provides access to a large audience. For example, around 97% of Australians read some form of newspaper every week in either digital or print form. Let's now look at how traditional media performs each of the three roles of the media in law reform that I have described earlier on in this video. Traditional media frequently raises law reform issues. This happens when newspaper, TV, or radio journalists report on law reform issues and on the views of politicians, experts, and the public about those law reform issues. Traditional media also provides a forum for people to present and discuss their views on law reform issues. Indeed, a group of people or organisations who are advocating for law reform on a particular issue can use traditional media to present their views and arguments about a law reform issue by taking out advertisements on traditional media. Finally, traditional media can influence the opinions of the public and therefore the opinions of members of Parliament about law reform issues. This can happen in various ways. Talkback shows on the radio and letters to the editor and opinion polls published in newspapers can generate public support for a change in the law and also assist members of Parliament to gauge the public's opinion about the need to change the law. If there is significant support in favour of changing the law to address a particular issue, then members of Parliament could well be influenced to support changes to the law that address that issue. In addition, traditional media can investigate and expose problems which generate public support for a change in the law to address those problems, and may therefore influence members of Parliament to vote in favour of changing the law. This is what happened when in 2018 the ABC Four Corners program ran a two-part series called Who Cares? That investigated aged care facilities and exposed the way some aged people were neglected and abused in these facilities, including through poor quality food, inadequate hygiene and isolation. The first instalment of this program was watched by 755,000 people across Australia. This program played a significant part in the Commonwealth Government's decision to establish a Royal Commission into aged care quality and safety. As a result of recommendations made by this Royal Commission, the Commonwealth Parliament passed legislation that set out the rights of people in aged care and that established a new, tougher regulatory and enforcement regime that applied to aged care providers. This is a very good example of the role that the media can play in influencing law reform. You'll recall that our learning intention requires you to analyse the role of the media, including social media, in law reform using examples. On this slide and the next slide, I've included a table that sets out the strengths and weaknesses of the media in influencing reforms, that is, changes in the law. You can use this table as a basis for analysing the role of the media in law reform. Please include this table in your summary books and make sure that you supplement the information contained in this table with notes from your reading of the textbook and from the discussion which follows, which will help you to better explain the points made in this table. The first strength of the media in influencing law reform is that it can reach very large numbers of people and so can inform them about law reform issues as well as influence their opinion on law reform issues and build support for changes to the law. However, while traditional media does reach large numbers of people, traditional media might not publicise all the views about a particular law reform issue and might be biased in the views that it does publicise. This is because traditional media ownership in Australia is highly concentrated. That is, a relatively few number of people own Australian newspapers, radio stations and television stations. As a result, there is a risk that traditional media will just reflect the views of the newspaper, radio station or television station owner, and these views might not reflect the views of the broader community. And even if traditional media does publicise a range of views about a law reform issue, it might provide more radio or television airtime or more newspaper space to individuals who have views on a law reform issue that are consistent with those of the owner of the newspaper, radio station or television station, and less radio or television airtime or less newspaper space to individuals who have views on a law reform issue that are opposed to those of the owner of the newspaper, radio station or television station. Finally, it has been known for traditional media to edit newspaper stories or radio or television footage in a way that gives people misleading information about a particular law reform issue. Social media doesn't suffer from this weakness because anyone can use it to express their views about a law reform issue. So there's no censorship of these views, and these views are freely available to other social media users. Another weakness of traditional media is that while a group of people or organisations who are advocating for law reform on a particular issue can present their views and arguments about a law reform issue by taking out an advertisement in the newspaper or on the radio or television, it's expensive to do this. As a result, the only views about law reform issues that are likely to be publicised by advertisement in the traditional media are the views of well-resourced individuals and organisations. Social media doesn't suffer from this weakness either because it's very cheap for a person to open a social media account which they can then use to express their views about a law reform issue. However, this does not mean that social media is perfect. On the contrary, the use of algorithms by social media platforms may mean that users are not given all of the information necessary to have an informed opinion about a law reform issue. This is because algorithms might limit the information on an issue that is provided to a user, or might provide biased information to that user. The second strength of the media in influencing law reform is that it is easily accessible and affordable, so that people are able to be informed about law reform issues. This is particularly the case with social media, which people are able to access for minimal cost through their laptops and phones. But this is also the case with newspapers, which only cost a few dollars. In addition, most households have a radio and television. However, a significant problem is that the media, and in particular social media, can become so full of arguments and opinions about a law reform issue that people become confused or disengaged. This may result in there being no clear consensus in favour of a change in the law. In addition, information on social media about a law reform issue might not be provided by a credible source and might be incorrect. In short, it might be fake news. This means that social media users run the risk of being misled about a particular law reform issue. This is a particular issue with social media because, just as social media is very easy to access, so it is very easy for anyone to express their views on social media, no matter how ill-informed or biased those views may be. The third strength of the media in influencing law reform is that it can be used to demonstrate to Parliament support for a change in the law. This is because both social media and traditional media provide a forum for people to present and discuss their views about law reform issues. If members of Parliament believe that these views reflect widespread voter support for a change in the law, then they are more likely to support changing the law in that way, because the principle of representative government, which applies in the Australian parliamentary system, means that members of Parliament risk being voted out at the next election unless they support laws that reflect community views. However, there is a risk that a vocal minority, that is, a group that has a disproportionate influence relative to the proportion of people they represent, might hijack the law reform issue and persuade Parliament not to change the law for fear that there will be a voter backlash against the change, that is, for fear that the members of Parliament will lose votes in the next election. This is especially a weakness of social media, where it's possible to run a spamming campaign against a change in the law, which gives the impression that opposition to the change in law has broad support, when in fact this opposition consists of a relatively small number of people continually publicising their views, sometimes under a variety of different names. In addition, there is a risk that the media will oversimplify complex issues and so mislead the public about the need for a particular law reform. This is a weakness of both social media, where graphic images or short clips provoke an emotional response to a law reform issue that is not based on all the facts, and of traditional media, where there is limited newspaper space or limited radio or television broadcast time that can be used to address a law reform issue. The final strength of the media in influencing law reform is that it can be used to publicise other methods that individuals or groups may use to influence changes in the law. In particular, the media can publicise a petition that requests Parliament to change the law, or a demonstration in support of a change in the law. In such a case, it's much more likely that the petition or demonstration will influence Parliament to change the law. This is because the publicity will bring the law reform issue to the attention of the public and members of Parliament, and the more support the law reform issue appears to have within the community, the more likely it is that Parliament will respond by changing the law. Again, this is because the principle of representative government, which applies in the Australian parliamentary system, means that members of Parliament risk being voted out at the next election unless they support laws that reflect community views. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. As a result of watching and taking notes on this video, you should now be able to analyse the role of the media, including social media, in law reform using examples. In this video, I have given you the example of the GetUp website and the ABC Four Corners investigation into aged care, and in class I will give you some additional examples. Don't forget to read the pages from the textbook referred to on the first slide. And if you find any additional information from that reading that you think is useful, then supplement your Cornell notes with that additional information. Thank you for your attention.